Good day, Father Matt Williams in my parked car. I hope you are well. We're on Book 1, Chapter 25, the fervent amendment of our whole life. So, the question he asks, what keeps us from being all in, being in it to win it, to become the saints that God has called us to be? Akempa says, there is one thing which keeps many back from spiritual progress and fervent amendment of life. That is, dread of difficulty or the labor which must be gone through in the conflict. Imagine that. Dread of difficulty or the labor which must be gone through in the conflict. In other words, it's so hard to not live by my desires. It's so hard to not live by my passions. It's so hard to not live by my will and my desire for what I want. And then the work and the effort that goes in to not living according to my desires and my flesh, but living according to the will of God. I'm not saying that desires and passions are bad, but we can't be ruled by them. And this is the problem in our modern day culture, that morality is determined by how you feel, right? By how you feel, by your desires, and not determined by the truth, or not determined by Christian revelation, right? But the hardest thing, according to Kempis, that keeps us from spiritual progress is the labor that takes in rooting out vices and living for God. So often, when we start living for God, things get a little challenging, and we turn back to earthly comforts to satisfy us, to bring us peace. We're so attached to worldly things. Again, we're human beings, we're not angels. I'm not saying things of the earth are not good and we shouldn't receive all those as gifts in a proper perspective, a proper way. However, we cannot make these our idols and our gods. We have to keep them, we have to have a level of detachment with them, right? We receive them as gifts, but we don't seek to idolize them, to rely on them for the source of our happiness, our meaning. We want to, in a sense, have a healthy relationship with these so that we can embrace the Lord, that the Lord is number one in our lives, that the Lord is the only God that we lay down our lives to, and that we ultimately seek Him. He says in paragraph 11, always remember your end, and that time once lost never returns. In other words, you'll never get this minute back. Without care and diligence, you shall never acquire virtues. So in other words, living a virtuous life, living a godly life requires that we have self-knowledge, that we know ourselves, right? That we seek to understand our strengths, our God-given strengths and blessings, and then our weaknesses, right? Our vices, and that we take time to understand those and to work on them. First and foremost, to bring them to the Lord in prayer and to exercise discipline. He says, a fervent and diligent man is ready for all things. Right? Being fervent and diligent. Being fervent and diligent. He that does not shun small defects little by little falls into greater ones. So in other words, if we get a little lazy in our spiritual life and start to let things slide and have a little sin here, a little sin there, a little vice there, it's going to gain momentum. And we're going to open doors up to greater sloth, greater sin, greater vices. He says, watch over yourself. Stir up yourself, admonish yourself, and whatever becometh of others, neglect not thyself. So in other words, we must first and foremost keep our eyes fixed on Jesus Christ. He calls us to study the cross of Jesus Christ, to understand the mind and the heart of Jesus and what moved him for love for us, to humble himself and to go through all of the things that he went through on the cross for love of us. That we need to study the cross, to conform ourselves to Christ, so that we can always be motivated by His strength and His grace and His example of what it means to walk on this earth, what it means to be human. We have to stir ourselves up. We have to ask for the grace, because sometimes we don't want to deal with this, because this is the hardest thing. Overcoming ourselves, going against our desires is so hard. But yet, that is what's required, that's what's called of us to become saints, to live for heaven, to become the spiritual man, to become conformed to Jesus Christ. So on this day, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may you be inspired today to do hard things for Jesus Christ. God bless you.